Look through a colonial baptismal register from 1630, then look at a hospital birth announcement from last week, and you will find the exact same name written in both places. Not a similar name. Not a modernized version. The exact same word, spelled the same way, given to a baby for almost exactly the same reasons 4 centuries apart. American given names carry an entirely different kind of history than surnames do, because while a surname was fixed onto a family once and passed down automatically, a first name was chosen fresh every single generation, by parents who could have picked anything, and yet millions of them, across 400 years, kept choosing the same short list of names. Some of these came straight out of the Bible, carried by Puritan families who wanted their children's names to be a form of prayer. Some came from English royalty and nobility, carried across the ocean by colonists who never stopped thinking of themselves as English. And a few have a genuinely stranger origin than most people realize. So which names actually appear in the earliest American baptismal and town records, and have never once gone out of use since? How far back can you actually trace a name in continuous documented American use? And which one of these 20 names belong to more early American presidents, founders, and statesmen than any other name in this entire list? We are counting down 20 of America's oldest names still given to babies today. Before we dive in, if you enjoy stories like this one, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this video reach more people. And if you haven't already, tap subscribe, because we dig up a new piece of hidden history like this every single week. One honest word before we start. Naming records from the 16 and 1700s are genuinely incomplete. Church registers were kept inconsistently, spelling was not standardized, and plenty of colonial records were lost entirely to fire, war, and simple neglect over the centuries. So take the order and the exact dates as a solid general guide rather than an unbroken, perfectly documented chain for every single year. What is certain is that every name on this list appears repeatedly and clearly in surviving American records from the colonial period, and every single one is still given to American babies today, meaning whatever number a parent chooses this year, they are joining a line that started before the country itself existed. Number 20. Ruth. This name comes directly from the Hebrew Bible, from the Book of Ruth, and it appears constantly in Puritan naming records from the earliest Massachusetts and Connecticut settlements in the 1630s. Puritan naming culture specifically favored Old Testament women known for loyalty and virtue, and Ruth fit that pattern perfectly, a name chosen deliberately as a kind of moral instruction built directly into a child's identity. The name has never disappeared from American use since, moving in and out of fashion in different decades but never once vanishing from birth records for 4 straight centuries. Number 19. Samuel. Another direct Old Testament name, carried by Puritan and Quaker families alike from the very earliest colonial settlements. Samuel Adams, one of the most prominent figures of the American Revolution, carried this name into the founding generation itself, a genuinely fitting connection given how deeply Puritan naming culture had shaped the colonies he helped create independence for. The name appears in continuous American records from the 1620s onward and has remained a consistently common choice for American parents in every single generation since. Number 18. Hannah. Hannah appears throughout early Massachusetts and Rhode Island records from the 1630s. Another Old Testament name carried by Puritan families who specifically favored biblical women praised for their faith and perseverance. Colonial diaries and letters from this era mention Hannahs constantly, often multiple within a single extended family, since Puritan families frequently reused a small, favored pool of biblical names across siblings and cousins alike. The name experienced a genuine surge in American popularity again in the 1990s and 2000s, proving a 400-year-old name can still feel completely current to modern parents. Number 17. Benjamin. This Old Testament name arrived with the earliest Puritan settlers and became permanently woven into American history through Benjamin Franklin, whose own fame helped keep the name firmly associated with intelligence, wit, and practical American ingenuity for centuries afterward. Franklin himself was one of 10 children in a Boston family that, in true Puritan fashion, drew heavily on biblical names for its large household. The name has remained in continuous, genuinely popular American use since the 1600s, rarely if ever falling out of the most common names given to American boys in any single decade. Number 16. Abigail. Abigail appears throughout New England colonial records from the 1630s onward, another Old Testament name favored specifically for its association with wisdom and good judgment in the biblical text. Abigail Adams, wife of John Adams and one of the most influential women of the founding era, carried this name directly into the story of the nation's founding, and her extensive surviving letters give historians one of the clearest windows into what an educated colonial American woman named Abigail actually sounded like in her own words. The name has cycled through several waves of popularity since, including a genuinely enormous surge in American use during the 2000s and 2010s. Number 15. Nathaniel. This Old Testament name shows up consistently in Massachusetts and Connecticut records from the earliest Puritan settlements, and it carried forward through American literary history through Nathaniel Hawthorne, whose own family had deep roots in Puritan Salem, close enough that Hawthorne added a W to his own surname specifically to distance himself from an ancestor who had presided over the Salem witch trials. The name itself remained popular throughout the colonial and early national periods, and has experienced several genuine revivals in American use over the past few decades. Number 14. Rebecca. Another deeply favored Old Testament name among Puritan settlers, appearing constantly throughout early Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth colony records from the 1630s onward. Rebecca Nurse, one of the women executed during the Salem witch trials in 1692, carried this name into one of the most documented and studied events in early colonial history, her own trial records preserving her exact name and testimony in remarkable detail for a woman of this era. The name has remained continuously present in American birth records for 4 centuries, moving through multiple waves of popularity without ever fully disappearing. Number 13. Josiah. A less common but genuinely persistent Old Testament name, Josiah appears in colonial records from the 1600s onward, carried by Puritan families specifically for its biblical association with a young king who enacted major religious reforms, a theme that resonated strongly with settlers who saw their own colonial project in similarly reformist religious terms. Josiah Bartlett, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, carried the name directly into the founding generation. The name faded somewhat in general popularity through the middle 20th century before experiencing a genuine and significant revival in American use over the past 2 decades. Quick pause halfway through the list. If a name has surprised you so far, drop it in the comments below. I genuinely read every single one, and I love seeing which of these actually turn out to belong to someone watching right now. Number 12. Sarah. One of the most consistently used Old Testament names in American history, Sarah appears in the very earliest surviving colonial records from the 1620s and has never once fallen out of common American use in the 4 centuries since. Sarah's biblical association as the wife of Abraham and matriarch of a nation made it an enormously popular choice among Puritan families specifically hoping to imbue their daughters with similar qualities of faith and endurance. Multiple genuine waves of popularity have carried this name through American history, and it remains instantly recognizable and commonly used today without ever needing any kind of revival, since it essentially never left. Number 11. Daniel. This Old Testament name, carried by a prophet famous in the biblical text for maintaining his faith under genuine persecution, appears throughout early Puritan naming records and has remained one of the most consistently popular names for American boys in every single generation since colonial settlement. Daniel Boone, the famous frontiersman whose exploits became legendary in early American popular culture, helped cement a specifically rugged, adventurous American association with the name that persisted well beyond its original biblical context. The name has rarely if ever fallen out of the most common names given to American boys across 4 centuries of records. Number 10. Elizabeth. Few names carry as much continuous documented history in American use as Elizabeth, appearing in the earliest Jamestown and Plymouth records from the 1610s and 1620s, carried directly from English royal and religious tradition rather than purely biblical origin, honoring the memory of Elizabeth I of England even generations after her death. The name has remained genuinely, remarkably consistent in American popularity for the entire 400-year span, rarely falling outside the most common names given to American girls in any single decade of recorded history. Its shortened forms, Betsy, Liza, Eliza, and Beth, developed their own independent popularity throughout American history, while the full name itself never stopped being used constantly on its own. Number 9. Thomas. This name arrived with the very earliest English colonists and has remained continuously documented in American use since the 1610s, carried by an enormous range of significant historical figures including Thomas Jefferson, whose own prominence helped keep the name firmly associated with intellectual achievement and political leadership throughout subsequent American history. Colonial records show Thomas as one of the single most common names given to American boys throughout the entire colonial period, a popularity that has genuinely never significantly declined across 4 centuries of continuous use. Number 8. Mary. Mary stands as arguably the single most consistently used name in the entire recorded history of English-speaking settlement in America, appearing in the earliest Jamestown records from 1607 onward and remaining, for most of American history until relatively recently, simply the most common name given to American girls in nearly every single decade for over 3 centuries straight. The name's deep roots in both biblical tradition and English Christian naming custom made it essentially the default choice for American parents for most of the country's history, a dominance so complete that genealogists specifically note how difficult it can be to distinguish between different Marys within the same extended family in old records, since nearly every family had multiple. We are closing in on the top 5 now, and honestly, this next stretch is where it gets really interesting, so if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good moment. You really don't want to miss where this list is headed. Number 7. James. Carried directly from English royal naming tradition, honoring King James, under whose reign the earliest permanent English settlements in America were founded, this name appears in the very first Jamestown records themselves, the settlement's own name honoring the same king. 6 American presidents have carried this name, a genuinely remarkable concentration that reflects just how deeply embedded James became in American naming culture from the earliest colonial period straight through to today. The name has remained consistently among the most popular names given to American boys for the entire 400-year span of recorded American history. Number 6. Anna or Anne. This name appears throughout the earliest American colonial records in both spellings interchangeably. Carried from English royal tradition, honoring various English queens named Anne, as well as from the biblical tradition surrounding the Mother of the Virgin Mary in certain Christian texts. The name has shown genuinely remarkable staying power across 4 centuries of American use, cycling through numerous variations, Anne, Anna, Annie, Nan, while the core name itself has never once disappeared from birth records in any single decade since colonial settlement began. Number 5. Joseph. An Old Testament name carried by Puritan and Quaker settlers alike from the earliest colonial period, Joseph appears constantly throughout 1600s records, chosen specifically for its biblical association with wisdom, forgiveness, and remarkable personal resilience under hardship. The name has remained one of the most consistently popular names given to American boys across the entire span of recorded American history, showing genuinely minimal fluctuation in popularity compared to many other names on this list, essentially never falling out of common use for 4 straight centuries. Number 4. Margaret. This name arrived with the earliest English colonists, carried from a long tradition of English royal and noble women bearing the name, and appears throughout colonial records from the 1620s onward. Margaret has shown a genuinely unusual pattern compared to other names on this list, cycling through periods of intense popularity followed by periods of relative rarity, then returning again decades later, yet never disappearing entirely from American birth records across the full 400-year span, proving that even a name experiencing a genuine lull in fashion can remain quietly present in continuous use the entire time. Number 3. Richard. Carried directly from English royal and noble naming tradition into the earliest American colonial settlements, Richard appears throughout 1600s records and has remained a consistently used American name for the entire span of recorded history since. Richard Henry Lee, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, carried the name directly into the founding generation, one among a genuinely long list of significant American historical figures who have carried this name across 4 centuries of continuous, unbroken use. We're down to the final 2 now, and I promise you at the start that one of these belongs to more early American presidents than any other name on the entire list. So stick around, because we're about to find out which one. Number 2. William. Few names in American history carry as much documented royal and noble weight as William, honoring a line of English kings stretching back centuries before American settlement even began, and the name appears in the very earliest Jamestown and Plymouth records from the 1610s and 1620s onward. Remarkably, William has been carried by more American presidents than almost any other name on this entire list, a genuinely striking concentration that reflects just how deeply this specific name became embedded in American naming culture from the earliest colonial period straight through to the modern era, never once falling out of the most commonly used names given to American boys across the entire 400-year span of recorded history. Number 1. John. And here is the name that outlasts every single other name on this list in sheer continuous documented use and sheer historical concentration. John appears in the very first surviving American colonial records without exception, the most common name given to English-speaking boys in every single decade of recorded American history for nearly the entire span of the country's existence, a dominance so overwhelming that colonial town records frequently list numerous Johns within a single small settlement, forcing clerks to specifically distinguish between them using middle names, occupations, or family relationships just to keep the record straight. 6 American presidents have carried this name, alongside an almost uncountable number of founders, statesmen, writers, and ordinary settlers across 4 centuries, and the name remains, even today, one of the most immediately recognizable and commonly used names in the entire English-speaking world, a single short word that has been given to American baby boys in genuinely unbroken continuous use since before the country itself had a name. 20 names, 20 threads of pure sound and meaning pulled tight across 4 centuries, carried by Puritan parents hoping to instill biblical virtue, by colonists honoring English kings and queens they had crossed an ocean to leave behind yet somehow never stopped honoring, and by ordinary families simply choosing what felt familiar and right for a new arrival. You did not choose your own first name any more than any baby throughout this entire 400-year history chose theirs. It was given to you, the same way it was given to a baby in a Massachusetts-based settlement in 1635, carrying forward a sound and a meaning that has genuinely never stopped being spoken out loud in this country since before it was a country at all. If your name is on this list, tell us in the comments how far back your own family has used it, and whether it was chosen for a specific reason passed down through your family or simply because your parents liked how it sounded. And if your name is not on this list, tell us what it is, where you believe it came from, and how far back you think it actually goes. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, that genuinely means something, so do me one last favor, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because there are hundreds more of these hidden histories waiting to be uncovered, and I don't want you to miss the next one. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.